again, my name is Aaron Earwood. I'm a bridge construction engineer in Divisions 5 and 6, and I'll emphasize bridge engineer as opposed to safety engineer. But I'm going to cover two safety topics: fall protection and working over and adjacent to water. These two topics are, over the last year, have kind of come to light and attention from a fatality that happened on the eastern part of the state. And it's kind of generated a lot of discussion, a lot of issues between OSHA and DOT. I know our DOT has formed a committee to kind of talk through some of these things. So things may be changing from what I tell you, but I wanted to introduce this to you because it's definitely come to light, and you'll see what I'm talking about here in a few minutes. We're going to start with fall protection. OSHA regulation says that each employee on a walking or working surface with an unprotected side or edge, which is 6 feet or more above a lower level, should be protected from a guardrail system, safety net system, or personal fall arrest system. The guardrail systems can be made of wood, cable, or pipe. Must have a top rail of 42 inches, plus or minus 3 inches, and that must withstand a 200-pound force out and down. The mid rail has 21 inches, plus or minus 3 inches, and must withstand only 150 pounds. And then it also requires a tow board when you have the guardrail system. This is a diagram of a timber system. You can see the top rail, mid rail, and tow board. Got the correct heights. When you're using timber, 8-foot maximum between vertical supports is required. Wire rope can also be used in lieu of timber, but if you do use wire rope, you have to have it flagged every 6 feet. I see a lot of wire rope used, but it's hardly ever flagged every 6 feet. They might have a 2 or 3, but the requirement is every 6 feet, so be looking for that. And the other requirement for wire rope is it must not deflect more than 3 inches, and that's after the 200-pound load is on it. So I'm sure I can go out to pretty much any job, and it's probably got more than 3-inch sag without any load on it. So that requirement is there. So they're going to really have to tighten this wire rope down if they're using that for their guardrail system. So definitely need some work on the wire rope. Use of barrier tape in lieu of guardrail system is never allowed under any circumstances. I've got a few examples here. You got your lifelines here. But they got this barrier tape out here, which definitely does not meet the requirements for a guardrail. So if someone was tied off with a lanyard there, they would be okay, but they couldn't walk out there and use that guardrail or that tape as a guardrail system. Another example, end of a bridge, just got it flagged, and then here. So that's not allowed under any circumstances. This is where the controversial part comes into play. Some of you may be aware of this, some of you not. But our standard bridge barrier wall is only 32 inches. So after they slip form a barrier, you think you're good. Everybody's working up on a bridge, overlaying cord slab bridges, whatnot. But the 32 inches does not meet OSHA regulations for fall protection. So according to OSHA, the contractor's still in violation for fall protection if they don't have anything else up. So, the contractor should be encouraged to add a temporary guardrail to the barrier to reach at least a minimum of 39 inches to meet the OSHA requirement. Here's a picture of an example. It's not my favorite picture. Basically what they did is they came in and just redheaded these, I guess, 2x4s and strung a cable along that. Obviously they're going to have to patch that barrier. The reason they did this one, unfortunately, you can see they got a paving operation going on here in the background. The day before this picture was taken, an employee was backed over by a dump truck on the paving operation, and the OSHA inspector came on site, and they did not have this additional guardrail system up at the time. And it happened to be the same OSHA inspector that visited the site down in Manio where the guy fell over the rail into the water and drowned. So to avoid any further issues, contractor the next morning came in and installed this system. It's probably a 250 foot bridge at least, maybe even longer, and they installed this system in 2 or 3 hours. So, contractors you start bringing this to their attention, they may start complaining, well, hey, that's just going to cost me tons of money, it's going to take forever to install. But like I said, they did this in just a few hours. There are systems on the market that contractors can purchase, and this goes for DOT maintenance. Anybody from maintenance in here? One guy in the back. There are products on the market that are basically like a clamp that you can clamp over the top of the barrier rail, and it's got some kind of post that comes up that you can either string cable or some kind of piping or tubing or something in between the attachments to provide that additional height for our barrier wall. I know the Division 2 safety engineer is working with some different companies to try to modify it to meet our needs for maintenance folks. But the contractors are going to have to come up with something on their own. And contractors are pretty creative. They can come up with something. They can make it out of timber. They can purchase that. They can weld something together and make it themselves. It just has to support that 200-pound load and get to the proper height. So, you know, they could, if they're going to bolt something into the barrier rail, I would prefer them to maybe bolt something into the top. And that way they can patch it, it wouldn't be visible. But it is a requirement for the contractors. So, like I said, the department has formed a committee to review this. Who knows, they may look at raising our standard barrier rail height, but then you start looking at extra costs for that. Obviously, the barrier rail height would be extra cost. Plus, you can't just come up with your own new shape. You have to get it crash tested, lengthy process, a lot of money. So I don't know what's going to come out of it, but I suspect that we'll probably leave our barrier rail the same height, and the contractors are going to be required to come up with some kind of system to protect that. In our first class, the Division 8 safety engineer was here. Nobody's safety engineer in here, or are they? Okay. The Division 8 safety engineer, or Division 6 safety engineer, attended one of the classes, and we got talking about how you guys out in the field should handle something like this, because I can pretty much guarantee you that 99% of the jobs have a situation like this. There's a few that we've brought it to the contractor's attention, they've gone ahead and corrected it. But how do we handle this as an inspector? And the advice that he gave, and you definitely need to, within your own division, talk with your resident and maybe your safety engineer or division construction engineer on how y'all should handle it. But the advice he gave is that as an inspector, you're not OSHA trained. You know, we're going over this stuff, but this is not an OSHA training course, so you are not an expert in safety. With the exception of imminent danger situations, you know, somebody's in a deep trench, they don't have any shoring, or they're working, you know, over unprotected edge, obviously you need to step in and stop them. On something like this where the barrier rail is poured, what you need to do, and preferably before you even get to that point, go ahead and let your contractor know what the requirement is if they didn't know, so they're aware. Document that in your diary. And then if they take care of it, they go ahead and say, okay, we'll do that, and they go ahead and install the system, great, document they did it. If they don't, then document that they didn't take care of it, and go ahead and notify your assistant resident or resident engineer that we got this issue out in the field. And from there, they can either call someone within that company, maybe their safety engineer, maybe we get our safety engineer to talk to their safety folks. If they still don't do it, it's probably up to your safety engineer and resident how they want to handle it. If they want to call OSHA and say, hey, guys, contractor's not complying, you know, maybe have them pay a visit and enforce it. But for you as inspectors out in the field, you notify the contractor and document it and pass it along to your office. The way he said is that you're not trained in OSHA regulations, but if we start enforcing OSHA regulations like we are an enforcement officer, OSHA will look at us as the enforcement officer, and you guys aren't trained to do that. So, like I said, imminent danger situations, we need to step in on something like this, notify the contractor, document it, and pass it along, and then hopefully the assistants and residents will follow up with the contractor and get it taken care of, because we're exposed to this as well. So that's the advice he gave. But talk with your division construction engineer or resident engineer to make sure they agree with that. Moving along, here's a project, got nice lifelines up here. Got a guy working right here. Doesn't do any good if you're not wearing your harness and lanyard, so a good system doesn't matter if you don't use it. Another example, got some guys over here working on the bridge, nice lifeline systems, but no harnesses. So that's not good either. It didn't do any good. Not going to get into all the ins and outs of your harness and lanyard, but this is just a quick slide. The guy's got his harness on. Here's a positioning device. Here's his anchorage with his lanyard, shock absorbing lanyard. I wanted to mention, when I was putting this presentation together, I went to safety and loss control and just got hundreds of pictures just for slides and examples and everything. And I was looking through them one day, and I happened to come across one picture. It was actually a safety bulletin where they'd inserted a couple pictures from an accident that had happened, and it was very graphic. And I hate, in one way, I ever saw it because it kind of sticks with me, and when I close my eyes sometimes. But and another side, I'm glad I saw it because it definitely reminds me of what I need to do. It was a picture of a guy that did not have his leg harnesses or his leg straps tightened on his harness, and he fell. And the best analogy I can give is if you take a grape and squeeze it out of the skin, and it was very graphic, and you do not want that to happen to you. So make sure your leg straps are tightened on your harness, because especially for us guys, it can cause some serious damage from the fall. So that, yeah, it sticks with me. So make sure you get it installed properly. If you have new employees on the job, maybe you have a trainee for the summer, or you have a new employee, you can laugh at them and everything while they're installing their, putting their harness on, taking 15, 20 minutes, and they're putting their legs through all different straps and everything. But before they actually go up there and use it, make sure that they know how to use it, and make sure you know how to use it as well, that it's installed right. If you do happen to have a fall, and if your harness and lanyard is subjected to impact loading, it needs to be inspected by a competent person. Not that you are not competent, but I would let your safety engineer look at it and make sure it's not damaged. And then you need to take responsibility for your own harness each day before you use it. Make sure that you check it for wear and tear and deterioration before you use it. Do any of y'all's offices, I know some residents' offices in their safety meetings, they kind of demonstrate it and have somebody put one on. Have any of y'all done that? It's a good idea to go ahead and make sure you get it installed right. Anchorages used for attachment of personal fall arrest equipment must be independent of any anchorage used to support or suspend platforms, which is pretty much common sense. And it must be capable of supporting at least 5,000 pounds per employee. I think they can also design something, like a PE design something with a safety factor of 2, but it has to be capable of supporting 5,000 pounds. So you can't just tie it off to anything. Some examples of appropriate anchor points: beams, large eye bolts, guardrails and railings, masonry or wood members. Any makeshift tie-off point or anchorage needs to be evaluated by a qualified person. Here's some few things that are improper, which some of them are pretty obvious. Your standard guardrails, standard railings, ladder rungs, light fixtures. Some of these are, like I said, pretty obvious. You just use good common sense before you just tie off to anything. Working over or adjacent to water. This kind of came into light because the guy fell over the barrier rail that was too low into water, was not wearing a life jacket, so they kind of go hand in hand. So that's why we're talking about both of them. OSHA says that employees working over or near water where the danger of drowning exists, they don't define any kind of water depth or anything, shall be provided with a U.S. Coast Guard approved life jacket or buoyant work vest. And for us in DOT, we have to use a Type 3 PFD. So here's a picture of a causeway out over a river. Are life jackets required in this scenario? Say what? It's not 6 foot?
All life jackets.
Yeah, life jackets. Yes, life jackets are required. If there's a danger of drowning, then the answer is yes. Anytime we're working over water where a danger of drowning exists, the answer is yes. What about here? Are life jackets were required? They got their life jackets on. Are they required? Yeah, they're working over water. They got their life jackets on. Let's assume, you can see these cables, that doesn't quite meet the 3-inch deflection. But let's assume this was a proper guardrail system around this platform that they're working on. So everything meets OSHA requirements and everything. Do they still need their life jackets?
Yep, I would say.
This is a rule interpretation from OSHA. Sometimes whenever things happen, they come out and kind of clarify. When continuous fall protection is used without exception to prevent employees from falling into the water, the employer has effectively removed the drowning hazard, and life jackets or buoyant work vests are not needed. So in that case, If they got, now this is, this right here doesn't meet OSHA regulation because it's sagging, but if it was a proper guardrail system, like if you're working up on a cap and they got their timber system around there, and you're working over water, you would not have to use it. Now, if there's a point in time where you're outside of that or something like that, then you'd have to wear your life jacket. But as long as they're 100% within that safety, that zone where it's the guardrail system is, they would not have to wear their life jacket. Let's take another example. Let's assume instead of this being a guardrail system around here that it was a properly tensioned cable and they had their harness and lanyard on. Would they still have to wear their life jacket in this scenario? Got one yes, any no's. All right, in this particular case, they're pretty low here to the ground. They're not that far over the water, right? How long is our lanyard? 6 feet. All right. These are some new slides I just inserted, so bear with me. If assuming this guy right here is tied off right here, if he has a free fall, he's going to fall 5 feet from the platform plus 1 foot here from this hook. So he's going to have a free fall distance of 6 feet. All right. And let's see, we got the 1 foot below the working surface. He's 6 foot tall, plus a 3.5 foot from the shock absorber elongation. Plus he comes down to total 14.5 foot total fall distance. So if he's only working 5 or 6 foot above the water, or say 7 foot, and he doesn't wear his life jacket on, he's got his harness and lanyard and thinks he's good, he's going to be floating in the water and he could still drown. So in that particular case, he would need a life jacket. Let's just assume here, this slide is assuming that his anchorage point is down at his feet. So the distance from the D-ring on the back of his harness to the anchor point is 5 feet. So he is going to go 5 feet plus the 6 foot lanyard. So his free fall distance is going to be 11 foot. So that means before you even stop, you're falling 11 foot before your lanyard even takes up any slack. So you got 6 foot, 11 foot free fall plus 3.5 foot from the shock absorbed elongation, and 5 foot, 19.5 foot total distance. That's a long ways. So I didn't realize that before I put this together. I knew the lanyard was 6 foot, but I didn't really put it all together that that's really how far you're going to fall. So in those particular cases, they would have to wear a life jacket. Now you get into a question and say, well, okay, you're telling me if I'm above 6 foot, I have to have a lanyard and harness and lanyard, but it's not going to do me any good. So, why do I even have to wear it? You get in that range right there, 10, 11 feet or whatever. It's kind of a gray area. And I tried to get some advice from the safety engineers on how you handle it. And he said, well, the contractor needs to have some kind of written plan. If there's a way that he can eliminate that drowning hazard or fall hazard by putting up a guardrail system, even if it's a little extra, money or whatever, then in those types of cases, he needs to do that. If they have a written plan that, say you're 7 foot above, so you're just above that 6 foot, and you're working over water, and everybody has their life jackets on, he's got a written plan, maybe that can suffice. I would recommend if you're in that scenario, if you're in that gray zone of 6 foot to say 12 or 13 foot or so, I would recommend talking to your safety officer to see how he would recommend you handling it. Because it is, lanyard's not going to do you any good at 9 feet high, but you're above 6 feet, so you have to have it. As long as you have your life jacket on, I would recommend talking to your safety officer about that in your individual case. And OSHA will like I said, they will provide comments on individual situations as well if you ask them. So this whole 14.5 foot and 19.5 foot total distance, I wanted to also talk about that because not only when you're working over water, but if you're working over live traffic, say you're shooting 10 points up on a girder over a road, it's open to live traffic, and you fall 14.5 foot or 19.5 feet, where's that going to put you? On a windshield of a truck. So you need to be aware of that. The contractor needs to have a plan of action to, in case like that, to obviously stop traffic first thing. That would be the first order of business. second order of business is they have to have a plan, regardless of whether you're working over traffic or not, to be able to get you down in a timely manner. There's, depending on how much you weigh, if you weigh 190 pounds or 180 pounds, versus like say you get up to around 225, 275, 300, your time, the heavier you are, the less time you can just hang in that harness, because that weight of your body on those leg straps, there's some veins that run up there, and it will cut that circulation off to those veins and can cause permanent damage in as little as 3 to 4 minutes, depending on how heavy you are. You know, somebody that's 170 pounds may be able to stay up there for 10, 15, 20 minutes, maybe longer. But you start getting heavy and it starts cutting that circulation off, then you can't hang there near as long. So the contractor needs to have a plan to rescue his employees or anybody that falls within a few minutes. So make sure you go ahead and address that and talk to your contractors about that. One of the safety engineers, I think in Division 8, said that we don't have it on inventory, but there is a product, I think it's Northern Safety Company that makes it, but it's basically something that you basically Velcro to your harness, and if you do have a fall, you can undo the Velcro and it'll drop down, and it's got a loop that you can stick your foot in it and lift up and take that pressure off your leg straps, and then you can hang there as long as you need to. So I would recommend getting those, talk to your resident engineer. Like I said, it's not on inventory, but they should be able to order that. But I think it's Northern Safety Company. And if you're interested and need to know, I think I can give the inventory number, or the number of where that is, and the phone number. So, moving back through these slides real quick, got one other thing. If safety nets are the method of fall protection, then life jackets and vests are required. We don't see a whole lot of safety nets, maybe on some bridge painting projects, you might see one. But if they're working over water, they still have to have life jackets. All right. What about this guy? Does he have to have a life jacket on? He's working under water? No. Got his nice metal rail here, meets the height requirements. He doesn't have to wear a life jacket. What about before they bolted this nice metal rail on here? Yeah. Yeah, but if he had his life jacket on, would he be okay? No. He's still away. I'm sure he's well above 6 feet there. So a life jacket by itself in this case wouldn't work. So the contractor would either have to have some kind of temporary railing on this rail, or they'd have to have something out here on the bridge for him to tie off to and wear a harness and lanyard. These are the types of things that we face. I mean, the guys out there bolting the rail together. It's a challenge. But we see it all the time, and you look at, we're talking about after the barrier rail's poured, it doesn't meet the height requirement, but there's going to be a time before the barrier's poured where they're slip forming it. Now if you got a girder bridge and you pour a deck, you got your overhang, and it usually has your rail on the outside. As long as they leave that up, then you're good. But what about these cord slab bridges that don't have the overhangs? And before they slip form the barrier rail, even if they plan on putting a guardrail system on top of the barrier rail, there's going to be times, and it's challenging, but the contractors need to make sure that they're still required to make sure they have that edge protected. So it's, like I said, it's a challenge, but it's a requirement. All right, this picture here, when I put it together, I need to change it. I say this every presentation, but when I was putting the presentation together, I picked this slide, and I was supposed to be working under water, but they're not working under water in this picture. But let's pretend that they're working under water for this example. Would they need their life jacket on? They work on this girder, got a lifeline system, and they're tied off with a harness and lanyard. Would they, if they're working under water, would they need a life jacket in this scenario? I didn't give you one piece of information, but I think this girder is pretty high. Let's say it's 22 feet high. Would they need it then? No. As long as they're wearing that harness and lanyard 100% of the time, and they're tied off, then they have. Remember that one slide where I had the rule interpretation, where if you have a guardrail system or fall protection, you are effectively taking away that hazard of drowning. Now they're above that distance of the stretch and the lanyard, so when they fall, they're going to be hanging in the air. They're not going to be in the water. So they would not have to have a life jacket in this scenario. I forgot to mention, if you are working in one of those gray areas, maybe you're not quite as high and you're working over water or working over traffic, They do make 3-foot lanyards that you can get, and it doesn't give you a whole lot of working room. They also make retractable lanyards that work like a seat belt, so you can kind of walk away, and if you fall, it tightens up. So those are options, and those might be some things you talk to the contractor about. If they say, well, in my lanyard, if I fall, I'm gonna be in the water anyway, so I don't have to wear it. And you can say, well, you can get shorter lanyards or retractable lanyards. But in this case, they would not have to wear their life jacket because they are high enough where their lanyard would stop them before they hit the water. Talk a little bit about ring buoys. They must have 90 foot of line on the ring buoy, and if you're working in multiple places along a bridge, they have to be spaced between ring buoys not to exceed 200 feet. So I don't know how often we see that, but that's a requirement. They need to make sure they got those. Here's just a slide of some ring buoys kind of held and ready there. Life-saving skiffs. Requirement to have at least one life-saving skiff immediately available where employees are working over or adjacent to water. Obviously, depending on the body of the water and some different factors, it affects the size of the boat. You must address the hazard of falls that may occur in the event of a failure of the operation of fall protection device or a lapse in their use. So I was talking about earlier, using that 100% of the time or having a guardrail system and staying within that. If that fails, this is our backup, having this life-saving skiff. So if somebody wearing their harness and lanyard, but I'm not going to use it, I'm working on this edge, I'm fine, and they decide not to use it and they fall, you've got to have this life-saving skiff to be able to rescue them. I know you can't read it, but I'll skim through these. These are a definition from OSHA on what is immediately available. It must be in the water or capable of being quickly launched by one person. Must be at least one person present and designated to respond to emergencies when their employee is working above the water. If an operator is on break, you must have somebody to replace him. The designated operator must either man the skiff or be in the immediate area so they can quickly get underway. That operator can be assigned other tasks as long as it doesn't interfere with his ability to get quickly underway. He must have some kind of communication system, like a walkie-talkie, so that he knows, first of all, that there is an emergency and then where it is. And it must be equipped with both a motor and oars. Getting into how many they need and the size, it depends on a lot of different factors, and it doesn't tell you exactly, but you got to make your own decision. It depends on the number of work locations, if they're spread out or if they're all in one isolated location. Obviously that matters. The distance between those locations, your water temperature, currents, rapids, dams, water intakes, that kind of stuff. You have to take all the factors into play in case there is somebody that falls in, how quickly you can get to them. Permanent brain damage can occur in a drowning victim within 3 to 4 minutes of oxygen deprivation. So that doesn't leave you much time for somebody to stop what they're doing, get in the skiff, start the motor up, get to where they're going, and rescue this person within 3 to 4 minutes. So you have to consider all that when you're planning how many you have. Most of the time we're working in one isolated spot on a bridge, but if you get in large bodies of water, particularly out east, or if you're working over a lake or something, then you could have a potential where you might need 2 or 3 rescue skiffs. I mentioned earlier about the fatality that happened earlier in 2010. The rescue skiff was in the water about 3.3 miles from where the contractor fell in the sound. It was being used for another operation, which was fine. We already talked about that. The boat was a 14-foot boat with a 4-stroke, 4-horsepower motor, so tiny motor on that boat. Winds were blowing 15 to 18 miles per hour. OSHA have said that the boat was not adequate to be used as a rescue skiff in this scenario. Now, had it been right there where the employee fell in, maybe it would have been, but being a third of a mile away, it was not. This is a picture. This is where the boat was working over here on these piers. Guy fell off the barrier rail over here, and he could not get to him in time. Obviously, our most important concern is that someone lost their life, but in addition to that, there was 4 different citations that the department got. I'm not real sure what the contractor got, but each of these were $6,300. That's pennies right there. But because someone lost their life here, that's the most important thing. We want to protect you guys, make sure the contractors are safe as well. And I suspect, you know, being this whole barrier rail height deal being kind of new, and, you know, I suspect later on if this kind of stuff happens, I'm sure the fines will probably go up, I would imagine, because I know OSHA's giving fines for stuff where people haven't died and you got a trench that's unsafe, and they've given bigger fines than that, so that's just a guess. As far as your life-saving skiff, you need to go ahead and clear it up with the contractor that life-saving skiff will be used to protect you or rescue you if you fall in as well. You know, I don't know if y'all are fighting over quantity disputes or something, or you made them tear something out, and they may not choose to rescue you. But hopefully that's not the case. Hopefully they would have enough morality to rescue you. But you need to go ahead and clear it up and document it.
Tornado drill we don't have to participate in, so
That's
just
good.
stick your head towards the way.
Yeah.
That's covered.
Yeah. So anyway, go ahead and clear it up. If they refuse, we can make arrangements within the DOT, possibly to get your own rescue skiff, or you can get your resident to talk to someone within that company and tell them, we can't inspect the work unless you're going to use that rescue skiff for us too. I'm sure you can work it out. I can't imagine this being an issue, but we do need to clarify it and make sure it is agreed upon up front. All right, we've got a few pictures here. What's wrong with this picture? Everything. Yeah, we talked about barrier and the tape. Caution tape is not approved as a barrier and guardrail system. It's cluttered. Anytime you got clutter, you're more likely to fall. Not really to do with fall protection, but all these bars coming out here. See these caps here? They got a couple caps on here, but none of these have caps. Just keep in mind that there's two types of caps. That any kind of exposed bar where there is a puncture hazard, OSHA says you do have to have caps on, but there's two types of caps. Some are just made of rubber, and it'll just poke right through the rebar and just go on down. You got to have the steel caps.
Aaron, it looks like there's two on the ground over there on the left.
Right here.
It looks like, well, they're useless right there.
Flat square top?
Yeah,
Flat,
they've got
yeah.
the flat square top,
Yep.
they've got a piece of steel encased in that plastic. If they just have like a dome shape
Yeah, these
top
right
on
here.
it, that's just nothing but plastic. They're not very good.
Yeah, plastic, etc. But yeah, they'll like Cameron said, somebody had fallen on one, and it penetrated them, and basically that tells you how deep the rebar went. That's all it does, because it goes down with you. So you got to have the steel caps, because otherwise it doesn't do any good. It just looks good. So anyway, this picture's a mess. What about here? Does that 3-inch sag apply to timber too, or just a wire? Yeah, this is pretty pitiful. They don't have anything wrong. They got their toe board. That's about all you can say for it. What about here? Some of these are obvious. I'm not sure if that's tape or plastic or what, but. What about here? Yeah, missing the mid rail and toe board. Started off good here, but it looks like they need to make another trip to Lowe's. Get a couple more boards here. What about here? I think on this one they used to have their overhang jacks up and have their rail system, but they took those down, and which I would prefer them not to do until after the pour. But this is a long bridge; they must have needed the overhang jack somewhere else. So we're missing our mid rail, obviously. I'm not sure how sufficient this is. We just got it tied off to this one bar right here. I guess it's tied off at the bottom. That's a long ways to go just for that one tie wire to hold you. Assuming this is, supported well, after they get the rest of these bars tied, then that would suffice for their mid rail. But right now, until they get that, they're missing that, so that would not be an acceptable solution. What about this? You see a lot of this kind of stuff, walkways. In this particular case, they're probably above 6 feet, and it looks like they're above water. So they'd have to have some kind of rail system on this walkway. If it was below 6 feet and they were over the water, then a life jacket would suffice. But they don't have either one, so that's obviously an issue. A lot of times, I'm sure you'll see contractors lay down an old beam, use it for a walkway across the creek or whatever. Those, if they're over water and they're low to the ground, everybody have to wear a life jacket across them, or they can put a rail system up to try to keep, make sure you don't have to put the life jacket on just to walk across that. And I forgot to mention that we've talked about danger of drowning. Most of the time somebody asks a question, well, how deep does the water have to be before I wear a life jacket? OSHA was asked that question by somebody, And their response was that one of the guys from Iwo Jima, can't remember his name, held up the flag. He was walking home drunk one night and fell face first in a ditch and drowned in 3 inches of water. And that was their reply. So, I mean, that's the way OSHA looks at things. But obviously, well, I guess if you're drunk, 3 inches is the danger of drowning. If you're not drunk, then you got to make your own determination. You got to use common sense of when will a life jacket actually help you. You know, will a life jacket help you in a foot of water? I doubt it. But in 3 foot of water, it could. If you get hit on the head when you're falling and you're laying there, a life jacket could save your life. So you need to use common sense and use good judgment on that. So I'm not telling you what the depth of water is. You make that determination yourself. But if there is a danger of drowning, then you have to wear it. What about here? Missing life jackets. They're working low to the ground, don't have to have any fall protection, but if they had their life jackets, they'd be good. And they're also, these dowels don't have the caps on them, so that's another issue. This looks, I don't know if this is the exact same bridge where the guy fell and died, or if it's another bridge real similar, but I'm sure this is pretty similar to what they were working on. Got 2 guys down here working on a safety net system, which earlier we said safety net systems do not replace the need for a life jacket, so they're both in violation. This guy up here, look at that barrier rail's about knee high here, so I mean, there shouldn't be any question about that. So if he had a life jacket on, he'd still be in violation like we talked about earlier. So really, the contractor should have come in here and put some kind of rail system or somehow strung some kind of lifeline or something he can tie off onto on the deck or something, come up with some kind of deal. But this is probably similar to how the guy fell off and ended up drowning. So it's not going to be easy, but it's going to be something that's going to be looked at more and more. Any questions? Like I said, some of this stuff we might get some more direction from the department on after this committee convenes, and we're still working through these citations with OSHA. So I don't know how that's all going to play out, but I want you to be aware of it. I want you to make the contractors aware of it. We've been having the AGC DOT conferences, and we are notifying the contractors and letting them know that, hey, this is the requirement. So they should be aware of it. They shouldn't be new to them, kind of moving forward. So I want y'all to be aware of it and be safe. So appreciate your attention.
If they are done with their tornado drill, we'll take a quick break. They were huddled up in the bathroom apparently, so we'll see if they cleared out yet. Right quick, just so I know who's who around here. Who's from bridge maintenance? Anybody here? All right, who we got? Who's inspectors? Assistants? Residents? Okay.
Hey, let me put one thing I forgot to mention. The OSHA regulation for fall protection doesn't apply to working over water, but for fall protection, it's basically from when the job starts, the first sign shows up, and they start bringing equipment till the time that everything's done is when that applies. If I go out there for a 12-month warranty, or I'm looking at the contractor comes out to bid on the job and they're just walking around up there and the barrier rail is 32 inches, then that would not apply for them, or from, if you do an initial inspection. Now, bridge maintenance out there, crawling around, looking around, checking for cracks, different things, where they're doing more and they're out there for a prolonged period of time, the whole day or something, then it would apply. That's why they're trying to come up with that system that y'all can take out there with you and put it up pretty easily and take from job to job. But if I go out there for a 12-month warranty or one of these guys, I wouldn't have to get a rail system up there just to walk across the bridge. So, but technically, if trucks are still out there, they're doing punch list stuff, and we're doing a final inspection, then it's supposed to still be up there. So I just wanted to point that out. Thanks.
All right, take 10. Be back at